The first thing Mason Reed learned about vampire royalty was that saving a princess could look exactly like stealing one. He came out of the pine forest just as the gray edge of dawn touched the mountains, one boot sinking into the snow, the other slipping on black ice, his breath scraping out of him in white clouds. The girl on his back was weightless in the wrong way, too cold, too still, her arms locked weakly around his shoulders while his torn paramedic jacket covered her from the rising light. He did not know how far he had carried her. 5 miles, maybe 6. He only knew his legs had stopped feeling like legs somewhere after the second ridge, and every step since then had been borrowed from a part of himself he thought had died in the war. Ahead of him, Blackwood Castle rose from the cliff like a cathedral carved out of midnight. Its towers speared into the silver sky. Its windows burned with a deep red glow, not warm, not welcoming, but watchful, like 1,000 eyes opening at once. Mason staggered toward the iron gate, trying not to think about the shapes moving along the battlements, tall figures in dark armor, silent as statues until every spear and rifle turned toward his chest. He wanted to raise his hands. He wanted to shout that he was not an enemy, that he was just a medic from Iron Pine County who had answered a broken emergency signal on a frozen road. But both of his hands were hooked under the princess's knees, holding her in place, and if he let go, she would fall. So he kept walking. The iron gate opened by itself with a sound like a giant taking its first breath in centuries. Beyond it stood an army. Hundreds of vampires filled the courtyard in perfect rows, pale faces, crimson eyes, black uniforms edged in silver, their attention fixed not on the castle, not on the dawn, but on him. Mason had seen anger before. He had seen fear. He had seen people look at him like a man who arrived too late to matter. But he had never seen an entire army look at him like he had just broken a law older than the country he was born in. The girl on his back shifted, barely. Her lips brushed the collar of his jacket as she whispered, "Mason, do not let them take me." That was when he finally understood she had been awake for longer than she had pretended. Before he could answer, a tall old vampire in ceremonial gray stepped forward, his face sharp as carved marble, his eyes locked on the dark stains across Mason's jacket. The old man looked from the cloth to the princess, then to Mason's exhausted face, and the courtyard went so quiet he could hear snow landing on metal. Then the old vampire dropped to one knee. One by one, the soldiers behind him followed, armor whispering, weapons lowering, hundreds of immortal warriors kneeling in the snow before a human who could barely stand. Mason froze. "What is this?" he rasped. The old vampire lifted his head and spoke with a voice that carried through the courtyard like a bell struck under ice. He carried royal blood across the crimson line. He shielded her from dawn. By ancient law, this human has not returned our princess. His gaze sharpened. He has brought home a royal bride. Mason felt the princess tighten her arms around his neck, not like a captive, but like someone holding onto the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. From the castle steps, a woman in a crown of black crystal appeared, beautiful, cold, and terrifyingly still. The army bowed deeper. The princess's mother had arrived. Mason's knees nearly gave out, but he forced himself upright, because whatever this place thought he had done, he had not carried Amelia Blackwood through snow and sunrise just to let a court decide she belonged to anyone. The queen's crimson eyes settled on him. "Human," she said, each word colder than the mountain air. "Did you save my daughter, or did you claim her?" 12 hours before the queen asked whether Mason Reed had saved her daughter or claimed her, he was sitting alone in Ambulance 3 behind the Iron Pine County Rescue Station, trying to make bad coffee taste like a reason to stay awake. Snow tapped against the windshield in dry little clicks, the kind that meant the storm was not dramatic yet, only patient. The dashboard clock read 6:17 in the evening, though the sky outside had already gone black over the Montana mountains. Mason rolled his left shoulder, felt the old ache answer, and looked at the empty passenger seat like someone should have been there telling him to go home. No one was. The station behind him had 2 working ambulances, 1 broken heater, and a crew so tired they moved like ghosts by the end of every winter. Mason had taken the late shift because late shifts did not ask many questions. They did not ask why a 32-year-old former combat medic flinched when radios cracked with static. They did not ask why he never turned off the scanner, even when county dispatch told him the roads were closed. They did not ask why he kept an old silver dog tag in the cup holder beside his coffee, face down, like a memory he could not bear to look at, but could not throw away. He was halfway through checking the oxygen levels for the third time when the radio hissed. At first it sounded like wind dragging itself across a microphone. Then a signal punched through the static, weak, distorted, and impossible. Iron Pine Rescue, please respond. Mason sat up. The voice was female, calm in the way people sounded when panic had gone too deep to show itself. He grabbed the handset. This is Iron Pine Rescue, Unit 3. Identify your location. Static swallowed the reply, then spat out a few broken words. Crimson Border. Mile marker 71. No police. No soldiers. Medical only. Mason stared at the radio. Crimson Border was not an address. It was a warning painted on old county maps in red ink. Human agencies did not cross it without treaty clearance, and treaty clearance did not happen during snowstorms at night. Beyond that line, the road bent toward the Blackwood Preserve, a stretch of private mountain territory where the sheriff did not patrol, hunters did not trespass, and locals pretended not to see lights moving through the trees after midnight. Mason keyed the radio again. Caller, repeat your emergency. The answer came softer, almost drowned by the storm. Someone is alive, but not for long. Send someone who still remembers mercy. Mason felt those last words land somewhere under his ribs. Not a request, not a threat, a test. He turned toward the station window. Through the glass, he could see Deputy Harold Mills arguing with his dispatcher, probably about road closures. Captain Lucas Ward, Mason's oldest friend and the closest thing Iron Pine had to a border authority, had left an hour ago after warning everyone that vampire activity had been reported near the North Ridge. Mason could still hear Lucas's voice in his head. Do not be noble tonight, Reed. Noble gets people buried. The radio crackled again, and this time there was another sound behind the woman's voice, a distant metallic groan, then the faintest breath of pain. Mason shut his eyes. For 1 second, he was not in Montana. He was in a field hospital 8 years earlier, with alarms going off and a young man begging him not to leave. Mason had followed orders that night. He had moved when he was told to move. He had survived because someone higher up had decided who could be reached and who could not. He had been praised for it afterward, which made it worse. When he opened his eyes, the ambulance interior looked too bright, too clean, too ordinary for the choice sitting in front of him. Dispatch lit up before he could call. Mason, we got a strange ping near mile 71. Do not roll on it. Repeat, do not roll. Border Command says stand down. Mason looked at the keys already in the ignition. Copy, he said. His voice sounded steady, which surprised him. Standing by. He hung the microphone back in its clip, then started the engine. The ambulance shuddered awake, headlights cutting through snow. He did not turn on the siren. Sound carried strangely in the mountains, and he had no desire to announce himself to anything waiting beyond the trees. As he pulled out of the lot, the station door opened behind him. Lucas Ward stepped into the snow, coat half buttoned, one hand raised in warning. Mason saw his friend's mouth form his name, but the storm took the sound before it reached the glass. Mason pressed the gas. The rescue station vanished in the rearview mirror, replaced by black road, white snow, and the red pulse of his own emergency lights bouncing off the pines. The farther he drove, the more the world changed. Cell service vanished. First, then the GPS blinked, spun in a slow, useless circle, and went dark. The county road narrowed until the snowbanks brushed both sides of the ambulance. At mile 68, Mason passed the last human sign, end of county maintenance. Beyond that, the forest seemed taller, older, and too quiet. No deer crossed the road. No birds lifted from the branches. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then he saw it ahead, half buried beneath drifting snow, a black stone marker taller than a man, carved with a line of crimson glass running down its center. The Crimson Border. Mason stopped the ambulance 10 feet short of it. His hands tightened around the wheel until his knuckles went pale. Every sensible part of him said to turn around, call Lucas, wait for daylight, wait for permission, wait for someone with authority to decide the value of a life on the other side. The radio whispered one final time, so faint he almost missed it. Please. Mason looked at the empty passenger seat, at the face-down dog tag in the cup holder, and finally picked it up. Not again, he said quietly. Then he drove across the line. The moment Mason crossed the crimson border, the ambulance lights changed. The red flash on the windshield deepened until it looked less like emergency equipment and more like something alive, pulsing against the snow-covered pines. The road ahead dipped into a narrow valley where the storm moved in strange circles, twisting around the vehicle instead of striking it head-on. Mason kept both hands on the wheel and leaned forward, searching through the white blur for tire tracks, hazard lights, anything that looked human enough to understand. At mile marker 71, he found the first sign that the call had been real. A black luxury vehicle lay tilted against a snowbank, its doors hanging open, its windows frosted from the inside. Then another appeared 20 yards beyond it, half hidden between the trees. Then a third, long and armored, with a crest on the side that looked like a thorned rose wrapped around a crown. Mason slowed the ambulance until the tires crunched to a stop. No sirens, no voices, no movement, only the soft tick of the engine cooling, and the whisper of snow falling over a scene that felt too expensive, too elegant, and too wrong to belong on a county road in Montana. He grabbed his medical bag, a flashlight, and a thermal blanket, then stepped out into air so cold it seemed to press directly through his coat. The flashlight beams swept across polished black metal, scattered luggage, a broken ceremonial mask, and thin silver casings that smoked faintly where they touched the snow. Mason did not pick them up. Every border medic had heard enough warnings about silver-treated ammunition to know it was not made for humans. He moved vehicle to vehicle, calling out in a low voice. "Iron Pine Rescue. Can anyone hear me?" No answer came from the first car. None from the second. The third vehicle had been built like a limousine and reinforced like a bunker. Its rear door was jammed, but the roof had buckled just enough to leave a gap near the side panel. That was where Mason heard it. Not a cry, not even a word, just a small breath caught between pain and discipline. He dropped to one knee and aimed the flashlight inside. For a second, he saw only torn black upholstery, spilled papers, and a curtain of dark hair. Then two crimson eyes opened in the beam. Mason stopped breathing. She was wedged against the far seat, one hand pressed near her ribs, her pale fingers marked with dark stains that looked almost black in the cold. Her face was impossibly composed for someone trapped in a ruined car in the middle of a forbidden forest. She looked about 25, maybe younger, but her eyes carried something older than the road, older than the mountains, older than fear. A torn cloak of deep red silk covered her shoulders, fastened with a brooch shaped like the same thorned crown on the vehicle. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, refined, and sharpened by effort. "You are not one of them." Mason swallowed and forced himself back into his training. Patient first, impossible questions later. "No, I am a paramedic. My name is Mason Reed. I am going to get you out." Her gaze moved over his uniform, his medical bag, his human hands. "You should not be here. I get that a lot." He set the flashlight between his teeth for a moment and checked the crushed panel blocking her legs. "Can you move?" "Not fast enough." Her lips tightened as another tremor went through the vehicle. "And they will return." Mason looked toward the tree line. For the first time, he noticed shapes in the snow beyond the road, tracks too smooth for boots and too deliberate for animals. He worked faster. Who is they? People who believe my death would simplify the future. The answer was so calm it made the hair on the back of his neck rise. He reached through the gap, trying to free a section of collapsed frame, and she caught his wrist with surprising strength. Her skin was cold even through his glove. "Do not touch me carelessly." Mason met her eyes. "I am trying to keep you alive." "I know." Something flickered across her face. Not anger, not fear, but warning shaped by centuries of rules he did not know. "That is what makes this dangerous." Mason cut away a strip of tangled fabric with trauma shears and slid the blanket around her shoulders as best he could. When the cloth brushed her exposed hand, a faint crimson shimmer moved under her skin like light beneath ice. She saw him notice. "Listen to me carefully, Mason Reed. If you carry me across the old line, my clan will not see a rescue the way you see one. They have laws written before your country had a name." He braced one shoulder against the door and pulled. The metal groaned, then shifted an inch. "Right now, I only care about the next 10 minutes. Her eyes narrowed, studying him as if mercy were a language she had heard about but never trusted. "You do not understand. My name is Amelia Blackwood. The forest seemed to grow colder when she said it. Somewhere far up the mountain, a bell began to toll once, low and distant. Mason had heard the Blackwood name in border briefings, in old warnings, in Lucas Ward's voice whenever the night roads came up. Royal blood. Vampire court. Do not engage unless engaged first. He looked at the brooch, the ruined convoy, the armed tracks in the snow, and finally understood why the emergency signal had sounded like a secret. The woman in front of him was not just a survivor. She was the reason this road had gone silent. Amelia's grip weakened on his wrist. "Leave me here," she whispered. "If you take me with you, they will make your kindness into a chain." Mason heard movement in the trees then, soft, fast, coming closer from several directions. He looked at Amelia, at the pale line of dawn beginning to form behind the clouds, and at the woman trying to protect him from the consequences of saving her. Then he zipped the medical bag, tightened the blanket around her shoulders, and said, "I have had enough of leaving people behind." Mason made the choice before he had a plan, which was usually how the worst choices began and the only reason the best ones ever happened. The movement in the trees grew closer, not loud enough to be human, not careless enough to be animal. Amelia heard it too. Her crimson eyes shifted past his shoulder, and for the first time since he had found her, the perfect control in her face cracked. Not from fear for herself. Mason could see that clearly. She was looking at him like he had just stepped onto thin ice with no idea how deep the water was underneath. "You need to run," she said. "You need to forget this road, forget my name, and tell your border officers you found nothing." Mason slipped one arm behind her shoulders and the other under her knees, testing how much pain the movement caused before lifting her. She went rigid at once, not resisting, but bracing herself like a person trained to expect every touch to become a debt. "I said leave me," she whispered. "I heard you." Mason eased her out through the broken side of the vehicle, careful not to let the twisted metal catch the blanket. "I am not taking medical advice from someone trying to die politely." Her breath caught, and for half a second he thought she might laugh. Instead, she looked toward the ridge where the sky had begun to pale behind the storm clouds. "You do not understand what I am. I understand you are injured. I am Blackwood blood. Then Blackwood blood is having a rough night." He set her gently against the side of the ambulance and reached for the trauma kit with hands that moved faster than his thoughts. Training took over where courage might have failed. He checked her breathing, wrapped another layer around her shoulders, and worked around the strange burn near her ribs without staring at it longer than necessary. The wound gave off a faint metallic smell, sharp as pennies left in winter air, mixed with something floral and cold that did not belong to any human body he had ever treated. Amelia watched him as if every piece of gauze, every clipped instruction, every careful touch was a puzzle that refused to solve itself. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. The question landed harder than the wind. Mason tore open a sterile dressing with his teeth and pressed it gently into place. "Because someone called for help. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." The trees whispered again. This time, Mason saw a pale shape move between the trunks, then vanish. He opened the back of the ambulance, but the moment Amelia saw the interior lights, her hand caught the doorframe. "No, they will track the vehicle. The road bends too close to the open ridge. Dawn will reach it first." Mason looked from the ambulance to the forest, then to the dark outline of mountains rising behind the trees. "Where is your home?" Amelia hesitated. "Northwest, beyond the old service trail. 6 miles, perhaps less if the storm has buried the low pass. 6 miles through snow. For me, it would have been nothing yesterday." Her voice tightened around the word yesterday. Mason understood too well what it meant to measure your life by the moment before everything changed. He scanned the ambulance, then stripped off his dark paramedic jacket. The cold hit him immediately through his uniform shirt, but he ignored it and wrapped the jacket over Amelia, pulling the collar up to shield her face from the growing light. She stared at him. Mason. His name sounded different in her mouth now, less like a warning and more like a plea she did not want to make. "Your coat is marked with your human service seal." "Good. Maybe it will remind everyone I was working." "No, you do not understand. Cloth that touches royal blood during passage becomes testimony." Mason paused, one sleeve still in his hand. A small dark stain had spread across the fabric where her side had rested against him. Beneath it, a thread of red light pulsed once, then faded. He looked at it, then at her. Is that bad? Amelia closed her eyes for a moment. It is old. That is not the same thing as bad. In my world, it often is. The shapes in the forest came closer. Mason heard the soft crunch of snow under careful feet. He did not wait to see who stepped out first. He crouched in front of Amelia and looked over his shoulder. Arms around my neck. She did not move. If you carry me like this, if you cross the inner boundary with my blood on your coat, the court will say you acted with intent. My intent is to keep you breathing. They will not care. Then they can learn. For a moment, the storm, the forest, even the hidden watchers seemed to hold still. Amelia studied him with those ancient crimson eyes, and Mason realized she was not deciding whether to trust his strength. She was deciding whether to trust his mercy. Slowly, carefully, she placed her arms around his shoulders. Mason lifted her onto his back, biting down on the strain as her weight settled against him. She was lighter than she should have been, but the miles ahead felt enormous. He grabbed 2 road flares from the ambulance, kicked the door shut, and stepped away from the only warm vehicle for miles. Behind him, the first figure emerged from the trees, tall and silver-eyed beneath a hood. Mason sparked a flare. Red light burst across the snow, turning the forest into a tunnel of fire-colored shadows. Amelia's voice brushed his ear, weak but steady. Follow the black pines. Do not leave their shade. And Mason, if they offer you a reward for returning me, refuse it before they finish speaking. He took his first step into the trees. I was not planning to invoice anyone. The mark on his jacket pulsed again, brighter this time, and somewhere far ahead, beyond the buried trail and the rising dawn, an ancient bell answered. Mason had carried patience before, but never through 6 miles of forbidden mountain forest while the sky itself became an enemy. Amelia's arms rested around his shoulders, light but tense, her breath brushing the back of his neck in. Careful, measured intervals, as if she was rationing even the act of being alive. The black pines rose around them in close ranks, their branches knitted so thickly overhead that the first gray light of morning broke into thin fractured pieces before touching the snow. Mason followed the narrow trail Amelia whispered into his ear, left at the split stone, down past the frozen creek. Do not step where the snow looks smooth. Keep the red flare low. Human eyes lie in old forests. He obeyed every word because pride was useless here. He was a medic, not a hunter, not a soldier anymore, and whatever followed them moved with a patience that made his skin prickle beneath the cold. Behind him, something snapped a branch without hurry. Mason tightened his grip under Amelia's knees and pushed forward. His lungs burned. His shoulder throbbed. His boots sank deep with every step, and the snow had a way of stealing strength without making a sound. The flare in his right hand hissed and spat red sparks, painting the tree trunks like pillars in a ruined cathedral. Once, a figure crossed the trail behind them. Pale hood, narrow face, eyes catching the flare light like polished coins. Mason did not stop. Amelia lifted her head slightly. They are not royal guards. That is good or bad? Mason asked, his voice rough with effort. Bad, she said. Royal guards would announce themselves before surrounding us. Mason almost laughed, but there was no air to spare. The trail climbed sharply, turning into a slope of buried stone. Twice he slipped. Twice Amelia tried to push herself off his back, murmuring that he would move faster without her. Twice he told her no. The third time, she stopped arguing and pressed one cold hand flat against the glowing mark on his jacket. The crimson light dimmed beneath her palm. You should hate me for this, she whispered. For what? For making your kindness expensive. Mason reached the top of the slope and leaned against a pine long enough to steady his breathing. Far below, through a gap in the trees, he could see his ambulance like a tiny red spark abandoned on the road. Beyond it, darker shapes moved between the ruined vehicles. You did not make me choose, he said. I did that part myself. Amelia was quiet for several steps after that. Then she guided him toward a frozen creek bed where the ice had formed in blue ridges under a skim of snow. Cross here. The water under the ice confuses scent. Mason looked at the creek, then down at his boots. That sounds like a sentence people say right before the ice breaks. It may. Comforting. I am a princess, not a park ranger. This time he did laugh. Once, breathless and surprised, and Amelia's arms tightened a fraction around him. as if the sound had startled something awake inside her. He stepped onto the creek. The ice groaned under his weight. Mason moved slowly, placing each boot where Amelia told him, keeping the flare out to the side. Halfway across, the trees behind them erupted with motion. Not an attack he could see clearly, just shadows breaking from the forest edge, too fast, too smooth. Mason dropped the flare onto the ice. Red smoke burst upward in a thick cloud, hiding the creek in a burning veil. He heard Amelia inhale sharply as the smoke wrapped around them. "Run," she said. Mason ran. The ice cracked behind him with a sharp report, and cold spray struck his pant leg, but his next step hit solid snow on the far bank. He scrambled upward, one hand clawing at roots, the other locked beneath Amelia's leg, refusing to let gravity have either of them. The red smoke thickened below, and the figures on the far side became nothing but silhouettes trapped behind fire-colored fog. Mason kept going until his chest felt like it was tearing from the inside. The sky was brighter now. Thin blades of daylight cut through the trees ahead, and every time one touched Amelia's covered shoulder, she went still with pain she refused to voice. Mason pulled his jacket higher over her face. "Talk to me," he said. "About what?" "Anything. Castle. Gate. How much farther?" Amelia's voice trembled only once. "Beyond the next ridge is the inner boundary. The crimson line is not a wall. It is a promise carved into the land. My ancestors made it so royal blood could always find its way home. And when I cross it carrying you, the bells will name what the court believes you are." "And what do you believe?" He did not mean to ask it. The question came out between breaths, raw and too honest for strangers in a storm. Amelia did not answer at first. Snow slid from a branch above them, whispering down like falling ash. Then she said, very softly, "I believe you are the first person in years who has touched my life without trying to direct it." Mason saw the ridge then. Beyond it, black towers rose against the morning, impossible and close. At the base of the slope, a line of crimson glass cut across the snow, glowing faintly beneath the frost. Amelia's arms tightened. "Mason, once you step over, there is no simple way back." Mason looked at the line, then at the daylight spreading behind them, then at the shadowed figures gathering in the trees below. He had no weapon except a dead flare, no plan except forward, and no strength left except the kind that came from refusing to fail the same way twice. "Then we will make it complicated," he said. He stepped over the crimson line. The mark on his jacket blazed gold-red beneath Amelia's hand, and from the castle ahead, every bell began to ring. The bells did not ring like church bells. They rolled through the mountain like the voice of something buried deep beneath the castle, old metal answering old blood. Mason felt the sound in his ribs before he heard it with his ears, and Amelia went perfectly still against his back. Beyond the crimson line, the path widened into a stone road that had been hidden under snow until the moment he crossed. Frost pulled away from black cobblestones, revealing symbols that glowed beneath his boots with every exhausted step. The towers of Blackwood Castle loomed ahead, impossibly close now, their windows brightening one by one in red and silver. Mason wanted to ask what the bells meant, but Amelia had lowered her forehead against his shoulder, and the small effort of staying conscious seemed to cost her more than any answer she could give. So he kept walking. By the time he reached the iron gate, the army was already waiting. Rows of armored vampires stood in silence across the courtyard, their faces pale beneath dark helmets, their crimson eyes fixed on the humans stumbling out of the trees with their princess on his back. Snow clung to Mason's hair. His hands were numb. His breath came in ragged pulls. The flare smoke still stained one sleeve red, and the mark on his jacket pulsed like a second heartbeat beneath Amelia's blood. No one rushed to help. No one shouted. That was somehow worse. Mason stopped 10 feet inside the gate because his legs nearly failed him, and for one terrifying second, he thought the whole rescue would end with him dropping to his knees in front of an army that had not yet decided whether he was a guest, a criminal, or something far more dangerous. Then the old vampire in ceremonial gray stepped forward. His robe dragged over the snow without leaving a mark. His eyes moved from Amelia's covered face to Mason's jacket, then to the glowing line behind them on the road. He inhaled once, sharp and formal, as if the air itself had become evidence. "State your name." "Human." Mason swallowed. "Mason Reed. Iron Pine County paramedic." The old vampire's expression did not change. Did you carry Princess Amelia Blackwood across the crimson line? Yes. A ripple moved through the soldiers, so quiet it was almost not sound. Mason tightened his grip on Amelia. She needed help. The old vampire looked at the jacket again. Did you shield her from Dawn with your own garment? Mason glanced down at the torn fabric wrapped around her. Yes. Did her royal blood mark that garment during passage? Mason's patience snapped thin under exhaustion. I was not taking notes. I was trying to keep her alive. The courtyard went still. Some of the vampires looked offended. Others looked stunned. Amelia's fingers curled weakly against his collar, and the old vampire's gaze sharpened. Then hear me, Mason Reed of Iron Pine. I am Elder Samuel Thorne, keeper of Blackwood Law. Before this court, before these witnesses, and before the sleeping blood beneath this mountain, you have fulfilled the first condition of the bridal shield. Mason stared at him. The what? The word had barely left his mouth when the castle doors opened. Every soldier lowered their head. Even Elder Thorne stepped aside. A woman descended the black steps with the kind of calm that made movement around her seem unnecessary. Queen Victoria Blackwood wore a crown of dark crystal and a gown the color of winter midnight. Her beauty did not soften the air. It sharpened it. Mason felt every instinct in him demand he look away, but he did not. He had carried her daughter 6 miles through snow. He could meet her eyes for 10 seconds. The queen stopped before him. Her gaze touched Amelia first, and for the briefest moment something like fear moved behind the cold. Then it vanished behind command. Bring the princess inside. 2 guards stepped forward. Amelia's arms tightened around Mason's neck with sudden, desperate strength. Not enough to hurt him, but enough to tell him everything. Do not let go. Mason shifted back half a step. The guard stopped. The queen's eyes returned to him. The courtyard seemed to lose temperature. You deny my order? Mason's voice came out rough. She asked me not to let them take her. A hiss moved through the court. Elder Thorne lifted one hand, silencing it. Queen Victoria studied Mason as if he had become less understandable and more dangerous at the same time. My daughter is royal blood. Her care belongs to this house. Then this house should have been on that road before I was. The words escaped before caution could catch them. For a moment, Mason was certain he had gone too far. But Amelia stirred on his back, her voice faint, clear, and impossible to ignore. He is right. The army froze. Queen Victoria's face did not move, yet the entire courtyard seemed to brace. Amelia lifted her head just enough for the court to see her crimson eyes open. Mason Reed did not know my title when he saved me. He did not ask my house, my rank, or my value. He saw only that I was still alive. Her strength failed after that, but the damage was done. Every noble gathered on the steps began whispering, and their whispers spread like frost across glass. From the right side of the courtyard, a tall vampire in a white formal coat stepped forward, his silver hair tied neatly back, his smile calm enough to be an insult. Mason knew at once this was not a man who arrived late by accident. How convenient, the stranger said. A human crosses the forbidden line carrying the princess, wrapped in marked cloth, just as the succession debate reaches its most delicate hour. Queen Victoria did not look at him. Lord Adrian Crane, choose your next words with care. Adrian bowed slightly. Of course, Your Majesty. I merely ask what every loyal house is thinking. Was this a rescue, or a performance arranged to force an ancient claim? Mason felt Amelia go rigid again. There it was. The trap she had warned him about. Elder Thorne turned toward the court, and his voice rang over the snow. The law is clear. A royal daughter carried through dawn, across the blood boundary, under the shield of another, must answer the bridal demand before the full court. Mason stared at him, exhausted, freezing, and suddenly furious. Nobody is demanding anything from her tonight. A shocked silence fell. Queen Victoria stepped closer, her crimson eyes narrowing. Human, you stand in a kingdom whose laws you do not know. Mason held Amelia carefully, because she was the only part of this nightmare that still made sense. Then explain them fast, because from where I am standing, it sounds like you are turning a medical rescue into a wedding negotiation. For the first time, the queen looked not angry, but uncertain. Then Amelia whispered against his shoulder, soft enough that only he could hear. Now you understand. They took Amelia inside only after Mason made them promise she would remain where he could see her, And the promise came not from the queen, not from Elder Thorn, but from Amelia herself. "Let them treat me," she whispered, her voice thin with exhaustion. "But stay close." That was enough. Mason walked beside the stretcher as the Blackwood guards carried her through halls of black stone and red glass, past walls lined with portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow him with open disapproval. The castle smelled of winter roses, old metal, candle smoke, and the faint, clean bite of antiseptic that told Mason somebody here understood medicine, even if they dressed it in velvet and ancient ceremony. They brought Amelia to a healing chamber beneath the eastern tower, a circular room lit by silver lamps and humming crystal instruments. Vampire physicians in dark coats moved around her with precise hands. But the moment one of them reached for the burned wound near her ribs, Amelia caught Mason's sleeve. Her fingers were weak, but the message was not. Mason stepped closer. "I need to look at it," he said to the physician. The woman looked offended. "You are a county paramedic, and you have a princess with silver contamination spreading toward her heart. So either your pride can help her, or I can." The physician turned toward Queen Victoria, who had entered silently behind them. For several seconds, the queen only watched Mason, measuring whether his bluntness was stupidity, courage, or the ordinary arrogance of a man too tired to be afraid. Then she said, "Let him assist." Mason scrubbed his hands, took the instruments they offered, and focused on the wound because that was the only battlefield in the room he understood. Amelia lay still on the black examination table, her eyes half open, her face turned toward him. "You are angry," she murmured. "I am busy." "That is not a denial." He kept his voice low. "Your court is trying to decide who owns the meaning of what happened to you. I do not like that." "Neither do I." Her answer was so quiet it nearly disappeared under the crystal hum. Mason worked carefully. The silver fragment was small, buried deep, and surrounded by a strange frost-like reaction that darkened the skin around it without breaking it. He had treated shrapnel wounds, burns, shock, hypothermia, injuries caused by bad luck and worse decisions. But this was something else. The metal resisted the forceps as if it wanted to stay inside her. When he finally drew it free, the lamps flickered. The fragment dropped into a shallow glass dish with a soft ring. It was not smooth like a bullet. It was shaped, engraved, almost ceremonial. A curl of pale smoke rose from the glass, and as it thinned, a symbol appeared on the metal, a white crane with a crown held in its beak. The room went silent. Mason looked up. Queen Victoria had gone utterly still. Elder Thorn leaned closer, his lined face sharpening with recognition. The vampire physician stepped back as if the dish had become poisonous. "That is not human ammunition," Mason said. No one answered. He looked from the queen to the elder. "Somebody say it out loud." Elder Thorn's voice came slowly. "That mark belongs to House Crane." Mason turned toward the door where Lord Adrian Crane stood with several nobles, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, his silver hair smooth, his expression touched by concern that did not reach his eyes. "A forged mark, clearly," Adrian said. "A desperate human trick, perhaps, or a planted token meant to divide the court." Mason laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because exhaustion had burned away his patience. "I pulled that out of her myself." Adrian's eyes slid to him. "From a wound you alone insisted on handling." The trap tightened so neatly Mason almost admired it. Every head in the room turned back to him. Amelia tried to sit up, and Mason immediately placed a steady hand near her shoulder without holding her down. "Do not move," he said. "Save your strength." She ignored him enough to lift her voice. House Crane sent the convoy route change. Queen Victoria looked at her daughter. "You have proof." Amelia's jaw tightened. "I have memory." Adrian bowed his head with theatrical sadness. "Your Majesty, with respect, the princess is injured, frightened, and currently under the influence of a human whose claim has already compromised the succession. Her testimony cannot be treated as stable." The word stable changed the room. Mason saw it in the way the physicians looked away, the way the guards adjusted their stance, the way Amelia's face closed like a door freezing shut. This was not the first time someone had used her condition as a cage. Mason understood then with a cold clarity that the ambush had not failed. It had delivered Amelia home wounded, marked, and surrounded by laws her enemies could twist. Adrian had not needed to end her life on the road. He only needed the court to believe she was no longer fit to choose her own future. Queen Victoria's voice dropped. Lord Crane, be very careful. Adrian placed one pale hand over his chest. I seek only the safety of the realm. Until the bridal demand is resolved, and until the princess's mind is confirmed free of outside influence, she should be held under royal protection. Mason stepped between Adrian and the table before anyone ordered him to move. That is a pretty way to say arrested. Several guards shifted toward him. Amelia reached for his sleeve again, but this time her fingers trembled with anger, not weakness. Mother, she said, and beneath the title was a daughter asking not to be turned into property in front of strangers. Queen Victoria did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Elder Thorne lowered his eyes. The physician stepped back. Two royal guards approached the table with silver-edged restraint cuffs lined in velvet. Beautiful things designed to make captivity look ceremonial. Mason felt the old field hospital memory rise in him again. The awful weight of being told to step aside while someone else decided who could be saved. He looked at the silver fragment in the dish, at Adrian's calm smile, at the Queen's frozen uncertainty, and finally at Amelia, who was trying very hard not to look afraid in the room that should have been safest for her. No, Mason said. The word was not loud, but it landed. The guard stopped. Adrian's smile thinned. Queen Victoria's eyes flashed. Mason picked up the glass dish with the marked fragment and held it where every noble could see. You can debate old laws all you want, but this is evidence. Where I come from, evidence does not kneel just because a rich man tells it to. Amelia stared at him, and something in her expression changed. Not gratitude, not romance, not yet. It was recognition. Mason was not fighting to possess her place in the story. He was fighting for her right to speak in it. Then the bells above the chamber rang once more, not red this time, but low and gold, and Elder Thorne whispered the words that made every face in the room turn pale. The bridal shield has challenged the court. The gold bell changed the castle faster than any order from the throne. Doors opened along the upper gallery, and nobles poured into the hall of mirrors with faces carved from outrage, hunger, and fear. Mason was escorted there with the glass dish in his hands, not as a prisoner exactly, but with enough guards around him to make the difference feel technical. Amelia followed on her own feet because she refused the stretcher, one hand pressed lightly against her side, her black cloak wrapped over her shoulders, her face pale but lifted. Every step cost her something, yet she walked like the hall belonged to her because it did. Queen Victoria took the obsidian throne beneath a canopy of red glass. Elder Thorne stood below her with the old law book open in his hands. Lord Adrian Crane waited among the noble houses, immaculate and patient, as if he had already arranged the ending and was only allowing everyone else to catch up. Mason stood in the center of the hall on a circle of crimson stone, his torn jacket still glowing where Amelia's blood had marked it. He had never felt more out of place in his life. His boots left melted snow on a floor older than most human cities. His hands smelled of antiseptic and cold metal. His heart kept trying to remind him that he was a county paramedic, not a diplomat, not a prince, not a man built for royal laws and immortal politics. Then he looked at Amelia, standing alone beneath 100 watching eyes, and the fear became simpler. He did not have to understand the whole court. He only had to understand what they were trying to take from her. Elder Thorne raised his voice. The bridal shield has challenged the court. By Blackwood law, the matter must be answered before sunrise fully crowns the eastern tower. The nobles murmured. Queen Victoria's gaze rested on Mason. There are 3 paths. Accept the bridal demand, and the scandal stabilizes. Refuse it, and the court may declare the crossing unlawful. Demand trial, and both you and my daughter remain under court restriction until judgment. Mason looked at Amelia. Translation? Amelia's mouth tightened. If you accept, they will say I was protected by a lawful consort and my succession survives. And if I refuse, they will say I was compromised by a human trespasser. Adrian stepped forward smoothly. A tragic but necessary interpretation. No one questions the human's courage, of course. But courage does not make him suitable to touch the foundation of royal blood. Mason turned toward him. You keep saying royal blood like she is a document you can file. A sharp hush passed through the hall. Adrian smiled faintly. And you speak of a princess as if she were an ordinary woman found beside a road. Mason's voice dropped. That is the first true thing you have said. Amelia looked at him then, really looked, and the hall seemed to fall away for one heartbeat. Queen Victoria leaned forward. Human, understand the mercy being offered to you. Accept the law, accept the position, and you will be protected. Mason glanced at the marked jacket. He could feel the room wanting him to say yes. Not because they liked him, not because they trusted him, because a forced answer would make everyone comfortable. It would turn Amelia's rescue into a clean political shape. It would make Mason useful. It would make her silent. He set the glass dish with the house crane fragment on the stone before the throne. The small piece of engraved silver caught the red light, and Adrian's expression finally tightened. Mason then removed the torn jacket from his shoulders and held it in both hands. The hall watched as the glow pulsed under his fingers. I need all of you to hear me clearly, he said. I carried Amelia because she was injured. I covered her because Dawn was hurting her. I crossed your line because there were people behind us and a castle in front of us. I did not know your law. I did not ask for your throne. I did not ask for her hand, her name, her future, or 1 inch of her life. Elder Thorne stared at the jacket as its crimson light flickered. Queen Victoria's face gave nothing away. Adrian's smile was gone. Mason turned toward Amelia, not the court. And I will not accept a marriage that makes your survival look like my permission. The words struck the hall harder than any shout. The glow in the jacket dimmed until it was almost gone. Adrian seized the moment. Then he refuses the bridal demand. The princess is unstable, the crossing is unlawful, and House Crane moves that she be placed under protective custody. Amelia's eyes flashed, but Mason spoke before the room could swallow her again. I refused ownership. I did not refuse her. The jacket flared, not red this time, but gold so bright every mirror in the hall caught fire with reflected light. Elder Thorne dropped the law book. Pages turned on their own, rushing backward through centuries until they stopped on a passage written in ink that shone like sunrise. His voice trembled as he read. The shield is not the one who claims the royal daughter. The shield is the one who can protect her life without taking possession of it. The hall went silent in a way that felt almost sacred. Amelia stepped into the circle beside Mason. She did not lean on him. She did not hide behind him. She stood beside him, and that difference changed everything. Lord Crane arranged the road change, she said, her voice clear now. He sent my convoy beyond the safe route. He counted on fear, injury, and old law to make me appear unfit. But the human he tried to use as a scandal has done what this court would not. He let me remain a person. Adrian took one step back. Queen Victoria's eyes moved to the silver fragment, then to the nobles of House Crane, who suddenly seemed less certain of their own shadows. Mason kept his hands open at his sides, the glowing jacket between him and Amelia like a banner neither of them had asked to carry. The queen rose from the throne, and every whisper died. Then let the court answer a new question, she said, her voice cold enough to seal the hall. Who benefits from a law that only works when my daughter has no choice? For 3 heartbeats, no one in the Hall of Mirrors answered the queen, and that silence did what accusation could not. It made every noble look at every other noble. It turned suspicion from Mason's torn jacket toward the polished side of the room, where House Crane stood too still. Queen Victoria stepped down from the throne, her black crystal crown catching the gold light from the ancient law book. Elder Thorne, she said, read the full passage. The old vampire lifted the book with hands that trembled only slightly. The bridal shield was never a chain of marriage. It was created after the first blood wars, when royal daughters were taken as symbols and used to control kingdoms. The law does not grant ownership to the one who carries royal blood across the boundary. It tests intent. If the shield seeks power, the mark burns red and binds nothing. If the shield protects without claiming, the mark turns gold, and the court must honor the rescued one's choice. The hall shifted around those words. Mason felt Amelia breathe beside him, slow and shaky, as if the room had finally returned something stolen from her before she was born. The glow in his jacket softened, no longer a flare, no longer an alarm, but a quiet warmth threaded through the torn fabric. Elder Thorne turned the page, and his voice grew stronger. The final condition belongs not to the shield, but to the royal daughter. She alone may name what the act becomes: gratitude, guardianship, courtship, alliance, or nothing at all. Amelia closed her eyes for 1 second, and when she opened them, she looked not at Mason, not at Adrian, but at her mother. Then hear me clearly before this court. I was not claimed on that road. I was carried when I could not walk. I was covered when the dawn would have taken my strength. I was believed when a man with every reason to fear us chose mercy anyway. Her voice did not rise, but it filled the hall better than shouting ever could. Lord Adrian Crane changed my route, placed loyal guards out of position, and sent word to the border that no aid should cross. He expected me to return wounded, doubted, and trapped inside a law he misunderstood. Queen Victoria turned her gaze on Adrian, and the temperature in the hall seemed to fall. Answer. Adrian's perfect composure finally cracked. The princess speaks from emotion. The human has influenced her. House Crane has served this throne for centuries. Mason nodded toward the glass dish. Then your house will have no problem explaining why a marked Crane fragment was inside her wound, why your seal authorized the route change, and why every argument you made tonight required Amelia to have no voice of her own. Elder Thorne lifted a crystal tablet from the evidence tray. Its surface brightened, projecting a thin map of the mountain road into the air. Lines of red light traced the convoy's original safe passage, then shifted to the exposed road where Mason had found her. At the end of the new path glowed a white Crane seal. The hall exhaled as one body. One by one, nobles stepped away from House Crane. Queen Victoria raised one hand, and the royal guards moved, not toward Mason, not toward Amelia, but toward Adrian. There was no spectacle, no chaos. That made it colder. His title was removed aloud. His house was stripped of succession influence. His allies were named for inquiry before the full council. When the guards led him from the hall, Adrian looked once at Mason with a hatred too controlled to be wild, and Mason felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The queen faced her daughter. For the first time that morning, the iron in her expression bent under something older and more painful than politics. Amelia, I protected the bloodline so fiercely that I forgot the person carrying it. Amelia's face softened, but she did not lower her head. Then remember me now. Queen Victoria nodded once, and that single movement struck the court harder than any royal command. She turned to Mason. Mason Reed of Iron Pine, Blackwood owes you a life debt. Our law gives you no right over my daughter, and my throne will not pretend otherwise. You may leave this castle under royal protection. You may return to your county, your ambulance, and your human life. No bond will follow you. No court will call you husband by force. The choice is yours. The hall became very quiet again, but this time the quiet felt clean. Mason looked at the open doors behind him, where morning light touched the outer courtyard. He thought of Ambulance 3 abandoned in the snow, of Lucas Ward probably furious enough to tear down the border station, of the simple life waiting on the other side of the mountains. He had earned the right to walk away. That mattered. Then he looked at Amelia. Not at the princess the court wanted to control, not at the symbol House Crane had tried to break, but at the woman who had warned him even while she was the one in danger. I do not stay because of a law, Mason said. I do not stay because of a mark. I stay if Amelia asks me to, and only if she can ask without this room answering for her. Every vampire in the hall turned to her. Amelia stepped forward, and the gold mark on the jacket brightened as she took the torn cloth from Mason's hands. She placed it over his shoulders with the same care he had shown her in the snow. Then I ask, she said, not for a forced marriage, not for a useful scandal. I ask you to stand beside me as royal shield by consent, witness to my voice before this court, and bridge to the human border that saved what my own house nearly lost. Mason held her gaze. Then I accept. The answer was simple, but the hall reacted as if a wall had cracked open. Swords lowered. Heads bowed. Elder Thorne closed the law book and knelt, not to Mason alone, but to both of them standing side by side. Queen Victoria followed with a formal bow of the crown, and after one stunned breath, the entire Blackwood court bent with her. By noon, the old border order was rewritten. Human emergency crews were granted protected passage through the Crimson Border during medical calls. Vampire escorts would answer distress signals instead of hiding them behind politics. Amelia remained heir, no longer under Crane influence, and Mason was named Oathbearer of the Blackwood Rescue Accord, a human title created because the old world had no word for what he had done. When the sun finally rose above the mountains, Mason and Amelia stood at the open gate, where he had nearly collapsed hours before. The snow had stopped. The black towers shone with red glass and pale morning fire. Amelia's hand rested lightly on the sleeve of his ruined jacket, where the mark now glowed as softly as a heartbeat. "You carried me across enemy lines," she said. "Now stand with me while we move the line itself." Mason looked out at the road back to Iron Pine, then at the army lowering its weapons behind them, and for the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders felt less like failure and more like purpose.